Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
For years, I've stuck with the same ShopRite. It's not the closest grocery store, but the produce deals are unbeatable, and their store brand cereal is surprisingly good. Plus, the staff knows me by now, and there's something nice about that familiarity. About 6 months ago, they installed this fancy new sample machine near the front of the store. Most people don't notice it, but I spotted it right away. I'm a sucker for free food. Always have been since my college days when I was surviving on ramen and whatever free pizza events I could find on campus. Even though I make decent money now as an accountant, old habits die hard. The machine is pretty cool. You enter your phone number, watch a short commercial about whatever product they're promoting that week, and then out pops a little sample. Usually it's something small like granola bars, mini cookies, or those Belvita breakfast biscuits. Nothing amazing, but hey, it's free. The problem is, the whole process takes time. You have to punch in all 10 digits of your number, then sit through this 30-second commercial that you can't skip. So if someone is using it, you end up standing there awkwardly waiting for about a minute. The first time I encountered this one particular guy was on a Tuesday evening after work. I was doing my weekly shopping and decided to check the sample machine before heading to the checkout. There he was, tall guy wearing a baseball cap and headphones. I stood a respectful distance behind him, waiting my turn. He got his sample, looked like some kind of protein bar, then turned and saw me standing there. Our eyes met briefly. He nodded at me and I thought he was going to move along, but instead he turned right back to the machine and started entering another phone number. He clearly saw me waiting there, and he was going for seconds. I had to stand there for another full minute while he watched the same commercial again and collected a second sample. I politely told him that I was waiting, trying to hint that he was being inconsiderate. He barely acknowledged me, mumbling that he was almost done without even looking at me. Then he just pocketed his second sample and walked away without another word. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing, but the following week I ran into him again. Same baseball cap, same headphones, and sure enough, after getting his first sample, he looked right at me, then proceeded to enter a different phone number for a second helping. This time it was those little chocolate chip granola bites. I expressed my frustration more directly this time, asking if he was seriously going to make me wait again when I was clearly standing right there. His response was dismissive. He just stated that the machine was for everybody and that I'd get my turn eventually. He showed no concern for making others wait. It wasn't even about the samples. I don't care if he takes 10 of them. It was the complete lack of consideration for other people's time. He knew the process was slow, he saw me waiting, and he just didn't care. After that second encounter, I did something a little petty. When he entered his second phone number, I took note of it. It wasn't hard to memorize since it ended in 4 zeros. The next week I went to ShopRite with a plan. I spotted baseball cap guy in the cereal aisle, so I knew he was in the store. I casually made my way to the sample machine and entered my phone number. Got my sample, it was some kind of cheese cracker thing. Then I entered his number that I had memorized. The commercial played and out popped a second sample. Just as I was grabbing it, I heard him behind me. He confronted me immediately, accusing me of using his phone number for the sample. I feigned innocence, suggesting it must be a coincidence. He insisted that wasn't possible, revealing that he regularly used that specific number for his second sample. The way he referred to it as his second sample so casually really bothered me. I pointed out that maybe he should wait his turn next time instead of making people stand around while he collects extras. He demanded that I give him his sample. I threw his own words back at him, telling him that the machine was for everybody and he would get his turn eventually. Then I walked away with both samples. This little game continued for weeks. He'd try to use his second number, but I'd get there first and claim his extra sample. Sometimes it was protein bars, sometimes little bags of chips. This week it was a small box of raisins. Yesterday, things finally came to a head. I was at the machine when he approached. I could feel him watching me as I entered my number and then his number right after. He finally confronted me about my behavior, asking why I was doing this and calling the situation ridiculous. I explained that waiting an extra minute while he gets seconds isn't fun for anyone else, and reminded him that he had seen me waiting those times and hadn't cared. He actually looked a bit embarrassed. He admitted that he hadn't thought it was a big deal. I clarified that it wasn't about the samples themselves, but about being considerate of other people's time. There was an awkward pause, and then he sighed and conceded. He agreed to stop taking multiple samples when others were waiting. I handed him the second sample, another box of raisins, and he actually chuckled, admitting that he hated raisins anyway, and that I was probably doing him a favor by taking them. So that's how I dealt with my entitled Shop Right Sample Bandit. I don't know if he'll keep his word, but at least I made my point, and if he goes back to his old ways, well, I still have his number memorized. I work as a court clerk at the county courthouse. Most days are the same, filing paperwork, managing schedules, and keeping things running smoothly for the judges. But one day stood out from all the rest. The day entitlement and rage crashed together in the most outrageous way possible. It started as a high-profile case that had been dragging on for weeks. This man had been caught running a massive investment scam that robbed hundreds of elderly people of their life savings. We're talking about millions of dollars that disappeared, leaving retired teachers, nurses, and factory workers completely broke. Some even lost their homes. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Fake documents, hidden accounts, recorded phone calls where he promised impossible returns. I saw his wife every day of the trial. She always sat in the front row wearing expensive clothes and jewelry that probably came from those stolen funds. She'd glare at the witnesses as they testified, rolling her eyes or scoffing loudly enough that the judge had to warn her about courtroom decorum multiple times. The day of sentencing, the atmosphere was tense. I was busy coordinating with security since we expected some emotional reactions. The husband stood there in his suit looking completely unbothered as the judge prepared to deliver the sentence. When the judge announced 10 years in prison plus restitution payments, the wife completely lost it. She started screaming about how absurd the sentence was, calling her husband just a businessman and suggesting the victims should have known better about their investments. The judge tried to restore order, warning her that she be removed from the courtroom if she couldn't control herself. She responded by accusing the judge of bias, claiming he had been against them from the start of the trial. They eventually had to escort her out as her husband was taken into custody. The judge always used the back exit of the courthouse at the end of the day. It was protocol for high-profile cases since some people get emotional. I was walking with him and two bailiffs, carrying some files he needed to review that evening. We had just pushed through the door into the parking area when I heard rapid footsteps behind us. The wife shouted at the judge, accusing him of ruining her life. Before anyone could react, she had launched herself at the judge, swinging wildly at his face and head. I dropped all the files I was carrying, papers flying everywhere. As she continued to hit him, she yelled about who they were and how the judge couldn't do this to them. The judge stumbled backward, his glasses flying off as she landed several blows. One of the bailiffs immediately grabbed her, but she was fighting like someone possessed. She demanded they get their hands off her while insisting that her husband had only made a mistake and didn't deserve his sentence. It took both bailiffs to restrain her, but she kept kicking and screaming. Within seconds, 3 more officers from inside the courthouse came running out, obviously having heard the commotion. The wife was still trying to break free, scratching and biting at anyone who came near her. I was helping the judge, who had a bloody nose and was visibly shaken. The judge asked if I was all right, and I replied that I should be asking him the same question. It took 5 officers to finally get her under control and handcuffed. By then, her expensive blouse was torn, her hair was a mess, and she had a scrape on her face from being taken to the ground. She complained that they were hurting her and threatened to sue everyone, claiming her husband's lawyer would destroy us all. As they led her away, still screaming threats and obscenities, I thought how Delusional she was. Her husband was going to prison for a decade, their assets were being seized to repay victims, and now she had just committed assault on a federal judge, one of the most serious crimes you can commit in our legal system. The aftermath was swift. She was charged with assaulting a federal judge, resisting arrest, and making threats against a court official. Given the severity and the very public nature of her attack, the prosecutor didn't offer any deals. I was called to testify at her trial 3 months later. She sat there looking much different. Prison clothes instead of fancy wear, no makeup, and a completely different attitude. The entitlement seemed to have drained away, replaced by fear. When she received her own 7-year sentence, she didn't scream or fight. She just cried silently as they led her away. The judge recovered quickly and was back on the bench the following week. He even joked about improving courthouse security during our staff meeting. But we all took it seriously. The new protocols for judicial protection are much stricter now. 3 years ago, I gave birth to my beautiful son. His father and I weren't married, and our relationship had been rocky from the start. He wasn't there for the birth, and I didn't put his name on the birth certificate. At the time, he showed no interest in being a father, so I moved forward as a single mom, building a life for myself and my baby. For the first 2 years, my son's father was completely absent. No child support, no visits, nothing. Then suddenly, when my son turned 2, he showed up wanting to be part of his life. At first, I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe he had changed? Maybe my son could have a relationship with his father after all. But things quickly turned sour. He didn't want to just visit, he wanted full custody. He claimed I was an unfit mother, without any evidence. That's when the legal battle began. What I didn't know was that his mother, my son's grandmother, worked as a medical assistant at a healthcare facility across town. I'd never been to that facility. My son and I had our own doctors at a completely different medical center. Both facilities used the same electronic medical record system called Epic, but I never thought that would matter. I found out what was happening in the most shocking way. During a court hearing, my son's father presented evidence, actual medical records of my son, showing every appointment, every vaccine, even notes from our pediatrician. I was stunned. How did he get these records? He wasn't on the birth certificate and had no legal access to them. The answer came a few weeks later when a friend who worked at the grandmother's medical facility overheard her bragging about helping her son win custody. My blood ran cold. That night, I received an anonymous text with screenshots of a conversation. It showed my son's father asking his mother if she'd found anything useful. She replied that she had everything and was sending pictures right away. She mentioned my son's recent doctor visit for an ear infection and made a snide comment about how I claimed I couldn't afford childcare but could afford doctor visits. My son's father responded that this was perfect for his lawyer to use and encouraged her to keep checking. His mother assured him that nobody at her workplace suspected anything and that she looked up our records whenever she had downtime. I was horrified. This woman, someone who had never even met my son, was illegally accessing his private medical information and using it against us in court. I knew immediately this wasn't just wrong. It was illegal. The next day I called my son's medical center. I told the representative that I needed to report a privacy violation because someone from another facility was illegally accessing my son's records. The representative responded that this was extremely serious and asked if I could provide any details. I explained everything, including the evidence I had of the text messages. The representative explained that this was a clear violation of Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and that they would start an investigation immediately and conduct an audit of who had accessed our records. They further explained that even though both facilities used Epic, staff members weren't supposed to access records of patients who weren't under their care, and that each access to a record was logged in the system. I also filed a formal complaint with the Department of Health and Human Services detailing how my son's grandmother had accessed our records despite us never being patients at her facility, and how she had shared those records with my son's father for use in our custody battle. The next court date was where things really changed. I brought my evidence, the text messages, the screenshots, and the preliminary results of the medical center's investigation showing unauthorized access to our records. The judge stated that these allegations were extremely serious and that unauthorized access to medical records was a federal offense. For the first time, my son's father looked nervous. He tried to defend himself by saying he didn't know it was wrong and that his mother was just trying to help. I countered that she had accessed private medical records of patients who never visited her facility and shared them illegally, violating federal law. The judge then postponed the custody hearing and ordered a full investigation into the privacy violations. 2 weeks later, I received the complete audit from the medical center. It showed that my son's grandmother had accessed our records 17 times over 3 months. She had viewed everything from my pregnancy records to my son's most recent checkup, despite neither of us ever being patients at her facility. When we returned to court, everything had changed. My son's father's lawyer looked uncomfortable and his mother wasn't present. The judge announced that he had reviewed the evidence of privacy violations and that the court took such matters very seriously. He stated that not only were these actions illegal, but they showed a disturbing disregard for boundaries and proper conduct. My son's father tried to argue that the records just showed he was concerned about his son's well-being, but the judge dismissed this argument. The judge explained that obtaining information illegally undermined his case rather than strengthened it, and expressed concern about the willingness to violate federal law. The custody case was dismissed, and I was granted full custody with the father only receiving supervised visitation rights pending completion of parenting classes. But that wasn't the end. The grandmother was fired from her position after the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act investigation. She faced personal fines exceeding $50,000 for willful misconduct, and the facility where she worked implemented stricter access controls and additional training for all staff. My son is 4 now, and things have settled down. His father has started his parenting classes and sees him once a month under supervision. The grandmother is no longer allowed to be present during these visits due to the restraining order I was granted. No one should have to worry about their private medical information being used as a weapon against them, especially in something as painful as a custody battle. As a college student, I saved for months to buy a walking treadmill from Amazon. When it arrived, my excitement quickly faded. The 3-prong plug was broken, making it completely useless. Between classes and exams, I didn't deal with it immediately. By the time I contacted Amazon, I was 2 days past the return window. The customer service representative told me I needed to contact the manufacturer instead. I explained I was only slightly past the window and mentioned my Prime membership, hoping for some flexibility. The supervisor was equally unhelpful, standing firm on their policy. When I called the manufacturer as directed, they pushed me right back to Amazon, saying returns should be handled by the retailer. I was trapped in a customer service loop with a 50-pound paperweight, taking up space in my tiny apartment. I called Amazon again, explaining the manufacturer had redirected me. Suddenly, the representative's tone shifted after checking my account. Now I was a valued Prime customer, deserving of a one-time exception. They instructed me to take the treadmill to any UPS store where it would be packaged and returned for free. I confirmed this with UPS by phone. Soon I was lugging the massive treadmill across campus. Sweating and out of breath, I presented my return label at the UPS store counter. The employee immediately told me I needed a box. When I explained both Amazon and UPS had confirmed free packaging, she repeatedly denied this, stating the box would cost $20. She announced this so loudly that everyone in the store turned to look. I explained I was a broke college student who had just spent my last money on medication, but she coldly replied that wasn't her problem. As I stood there mortified, a UPS driver who had witnessed the exchange offered to help. He suggested finding boxes out back and attempted to borrow tape from the store, but the employee refused. Undeterred, the driver led me to the dumpster where we found several flattened boxes. We pieced them together and got some painter's tape from the Little Caesars next door. Together, we cobbled together a makeshift box for my treadmill. The driver joked that our patchwork packaging would force them to repackage it properly anyway. When we returned with our DIY solution, the employee's face was so satisfying. She reluctantly processed my return, making a show of noting that it needed repackaging. As I left, the driver wished me luck and hoped my next treadmill would work better. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.